Oh, yes, it's free agency review guest week. It continues here on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Today we'll be talking to Mike Catron. He'll have some fantasy risers, some fantasy fallers. I don't know. I have to come up with a show title and a graphic, and sometimes I take small liberties. It's been a fun week so far. Dan Titus on Monday, Mike Barner yesterday. I am clustering my Chicago Bulls fans on the show, and I feel pretty confident that we'll maybe get into something going on there, but whatever. That's all happening in a moment. I'm Dan Vesperis. Thank you all for joining us. Let's bring in the man of the hour, Mike Catron, at Watch the Boxes on the socials. He is the host of Watching the Boxes Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Mike, you and I had a really nice chance to catch up before the show, but I'm going to pretend for a moment here that I don't know what's going on in your life. So what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing way better. My daughter is sleeping, which means I am sleeping. So, last time I joined you, I'm not really sure what happened or what was being said at all because, one, I was sleep deprived, and two, I figured out that Canadians get 62 weeks of parental leave.
That's impossible.
And it's true. And I am radicalized. I'm ready to make sure that people have parental leave because I think it's 0 right now in America. Yeah, 0 guaranteed. Mm-hmm. Yeah, everyone should look into childcare. What happens if you have a child? Look up what childcare is in other countries. Like just do like 5 minutes, and then call your whoever is representing you every day, every hour, every day.
More. We need, it's
find out where they live.
The thing is, like, when this topic comes up, and don't worry, everybody, we're going to get into fantasy here in just a second.
I promise.
When this topic comes up of parental leave, the pushback is always like, how will any company make it? And it's like, well, ask literally every other place on earth. Like, somehow they've figured out how to make it work. I don't know. Magic?
Yeah.
An argument makes no sense. It holds no weight. I get it. Like, it's easier for companies if people come back to work in 3 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever it is, but it's not mandatory. People are, I hate to say this, other people can do the job that the person.
Oh, absolutely. Which would mean more people who are employed. Like, the best thing for a company would be if they didn't have to pay their employees. That would be the best thing for the company. So I don't really give a
economically
good for the company. I don't care.
Yeah. But unfortunately, or fortunately, you got to put formula and bottles and what have you. And
rent's expensive,
rent and
I live in Chicago. It's expensive.
Yes, I am in West Los Angeles, so I feel your pain. You don't live that far from Canada, though.
No, not at all. I could take the boat. I could take the border.
I gotta travel a little farther. I gotta make my way up the Pacific coast. I went to Vancouver once. It was delightful. We didn't have a baby there or anything, so I didn't get to experience the parental leave part. But it was a lovely trip to the Great White North. But Mike, let's dive into your list immediately here. Free agency last week, a lot of stuff happened. You gave me a few names, and I put one of them in the thumbnail. But you can start wherever you want. You want to start with a riser, a faller?
I want to start with someone who I think is a riser.
Okay.
Actually, I'll do two risers. I have 3 risers.
3 risers.
Yes.
Paul Riser.
4 risers. Paul Riser, and then DeJounte Murray. And
interesting. Okay.
I think DeJounte Murray is a riser because I think him and Trey living together in Atlanta was a nice experiment, but Trey needed the ball like 100% of the time. Trey was getting, 10 plus assists a game. And that experiment, while it failed, right?
Yeah.
DeJounte Murray was good in that secondary role. And when moving to like New Orleans, or Narlands, if you're from there, I think it's
Nolans.
It's hot. Man, talk about hot. It's don't go there in the summer. It is humidity off the they don't make a chart with the humidity range that is.
I wouldn't last 4 minutes in that kind of humidity.
No,
4 minutes.
People don't leave the house until nighttime. That's why the bars are open 24 hours.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
People don't even leave till like 8 p.m. I'm in my house all day.
I'm a fragile, delicate flower. I live in West Los Angeles, where like the hottest day is 78 and the coldest day is like 64.
Must be
So
nice. I don't
yeah,
know
it
what
actually
it's like.
it is
Must be nice.
extraordinarily easy. That's why all I wear are t-shirts all the time. It's very simple. So you think that the fit is going to be
The fit's better.
Is there going to be enough for him to do? Because he's going from a place with one extraordinarily high usage guy to a place that has three like medium high usage guys, right?
And I think that's why I like this role better, because I think sometimes people get caught up with the whole, well, his usage is going to be down, right? It's like, well, if you that isn't great for fantasy. I'll fully admit that if you're going from high usage to low usage. But I don't think they brought him in to be a low usage guy. Like Zion's the guy out there, right? But Brandon Ingram, they weren't trying to get him terribly involved anyway. And so CJ McCollum is probably better as a secondary ball handler instead of a primary. So that kind of makes him the secondary guy, right? And if he's the secondary guy running the point versus being the secondary guy with another point guard, I think that actually allows him to be more of a playmaker. And I think his assists will go up based simply on the fact that they'll want him to run that offense. And we've seen, like, I don't think we're going to go back to like the Spurs days, like at all. Like, I think that's absurd. But somewhere between Spurs and Atlanta, you're still looking at what, like a top 35 player?
So yeah, if you're looking at the last season in San Antonio, that was the mega season.
That was his peak. It was like what, 21, 8, 21, 9. It's crazy.
Yeah, and 2 steals per ball game, which was also I mean, and that was a little bit of what you were kind of hoping for in Atlanta, and the steals never quite got that high either. 1 point, not that 1.5 isn't good, but 2. We don't really think about it, but like half a steal per ball game, you're talking about another 30 to 40 steals on the season in Roto. That's a really big deal. That's a couple of Roto points. Typically, you're within 30 or 40 of somebody. So that's a big part of the leap. Do you think that, and this is hard to say, but if his offensive role slides back to more distribution than it was this past year, because he still got 18.5 shots a game. This is still the highest. I think that's the highest number of shots per game he's taken in any spot. But you're right. The assists are down at 6 instead of 9. Is there a way that any of this could impact the defensive side? Is it going to allow him to focus more on that end, or am I sort of galaxy braining that too far?
Well, I feel like steals are like so finicky. Like I've never like relied on like 1 season steal numbers or even 2 season steal numbers. They come and they go, and sometimes there is a 2 steal season. Somewhere between 1.5 and 2, I'm happy. I'm not going to draft on that number. Like I'm not going to draft on 1.7 or 2 or 1.5, but I'm going to look at him and say, I expect if I get 1.5, I'm happy, and if I get more than that, that's great.
Can he? What do you think about the scoring side? That's got to come down, right?
Yeah, probably. There's too many shots to go around there. But I think a lot of people, when they say, oh, he's going to take less shots, well, is he going to be more efficient? And with other guys who need to be guarded and with other guys on that team who can distribute, he's not a guy who like we just saw it. Trey has the ball in his hands. DeJounte Murray got his. Zion's going to have the ball sometimes. Ingram's going to have the ball sometimes. DeJounte Murray is going to figure out ways to score. So I'm not seeing like a huge drop off on points. And I think like, you bump up some assists, you bump up some counting stats. They don't have a center really. So like, I don't think the rebounds are going anywhere for DeJounte. Maybe they even go up. Keep everything else steady. Maybe lower the points and bump up the field goal percentage. That's still a really good player. And I think a lot of people are thinking down on him. They're like, he's going to a busy team. And I like that people are thinking that, because maybe he drops in drafts.
Yeah, that's going to be the real key, is where does he get drafted? Because it was around, 25 to 30 range last year?
I think he was like some second, third round player.
Yeah, late second, early third, something like that's what I think. That's what I'm remembering. I don't know.
Yeah, and the second round was such like a nonsense.
Every year it's the same thing. Where like, On August 8th or whenever they open, you've got these 3 or 4 names. You're like, oh, those are interesting second round names. And then they spread.
Yes.
And somehow it happens every year. It's the same thing. The ones you like get pushed to the end of the first, and the ones you don't get pushed into the third, and you're left with this goofball crop of second rounders. And you're like, I don't know what to do with these guys anymore.
There's a lot of great third round players.
Oh, there's a ton. There's a ton.
And some of them have to go in the second round. And I think maybe, I don't know. I don't hate DeJounte Murray, like reaching for DeJounte Murray, a player who gets stats across the board and good steals. I don't hate that. And assists. Like, I don't hate that.
What do you think his presence does to the rest of the Pels?
I think it makes them better. Like, I really do think it makes that team better because Brandon Ingram isn't like a point forward. He's really good at distributing, but he's not a point forward. CJ McCollum also is not a point guard. He's very good at distributing. Like, they're like a very modern, everybody does everything kind of team, and I love that. If you want to run an offense through Zion and DeJounte Murray, you can, and that's a really fun pick and roll. That's a really fun both ways pick and roll. Even like it's. I think it just allows those other players, to exist off the ball in ways that I think it makes them better. You could make an argument that it doesn't make Brandon Ingram better; it makes him worse because they're not asking him to do the things that they're going to ask DeJounte Murray to do. But I don't know. Brandon Ingram's like a real question mark for me. How do you feel about Brandon Ingram these days? Because he's always kind of hurt. He's always kind of good, and he's always kind of hurt. And it's like,
Yeah, and he might not even be there on opening night.
I hope not.
He's been in every trade rumor, literally every single one for like the last 3 months.
Zach LaVine for Brandon Ingram right now, done deal.
Yeah, just make it so. No, I mean, you're right, though, because Ingram was around 6 assists a game this last year, which is good, but probably not him in his best role. So, even if you put him into a better role, I don't know how he still gets 16 shots. The 6 assists come down. That's a guy that I think would have to take a fantasy at least step backwards. I might argue that McCollum probably looking at a downtick from 16 shots a ball game, and a lot of his value was tied up in hitting a ton of 3-pointers. But Zion can still do what he was doing. Because I don't think
Zion's their best weapon. Zion's going to do what Zion does. It doesn't mean Brandon Ingram has to do less, which I actually think is good for him because I don't think he needs to do. He's better when he doesn't do everything. McCollum will just spot up from 3 instead of try to make his own threes, which probably makes him a little worse for fantasy. But I'm not worried about not getting my threes from him. Drop his assists a little bit. Trey Murphy probably gets hurt here.
Yeah, there ain't a whole lot of room left for Murphy or Herb Jones, unless they move somebody. What about on the Hawks side, before we wrap up this discussion? They got Dyson Daniels back. We know Jalen Johnson is an absolute Goliath at fantasy. Trae Young goes back to being the only guy handling the basketball all the time. So, and I just talked yesterday with Mike Barner about how Clint Capella is still there, even after all this time.
Who would have thought? Yeah.
So, but everything's a balancing act right now because we're like, well, these guys we like, but where are they going to get drafted? Who do you think might end up being an interesting value in Atlanta / possible target? Like, there's so many ways to try to process this information.
I mean, that's kind of why, I'm not terribly interested in anybody in Atlanta outside of Trae and Jalen. You could make the argument that you can revert Trae back to, I'm the guy. I'm going to take 20 plus 22, 23 shots a game. We're tanking, I guess, is what they're doing.
Yeah, question mark.
Yeah, and maybe the assists even pop up over 10 to 11, etc. But Trae's going to do what he does. He's going to shoot at volume. He's going to score. I don't see a huge jump from him, but usage-wise, he's already really high. It goes up a little bit. He goes up a little bit. I know he had that borderline top 10 season a few years ago before Murray got there. So there's a good second round player, Trae Young.
Yeah, and that might be where you get him. Thinking about some of the names, although maybe Turn feels like where he ends up going, somewhere in that.
He's like a good turn player. It's hard to find 10 to 11 assists a game anywhere at all these days. You know who I also think is a nice. I've said this already on the Watching the Boxes fantasy basketball podcast. Jalen Johnson might also be a second, third round player.
Yeah, and based on what I'm hearing and seeing, I think you may have to get him there because the hype train is going. He was at 16, 9, and 3.5 last year. 2 defensive stats, 1.33 pointers. Free throw percent was kind of the only thing holding him back, and that dropped him into the 4th round. But like, if that dude gets 2.5 more shots a game or whatever comes from this DeJounte move, he's a monster. He can do everything.
Or if he bumps his assists up to like 4 or 5,
he can do everything.
Range, he can do that. He absolutely can do that.
If he gets more stuff, he could be a guy that's a positive in 8 out of 9 categories this year.
Yeah, it's terribly unfortunate that there are no more sleepers in fantasy basketball.
No,
they don't exist.
They really don't. There really aren't. I mean, like in a blue moon, frankly, like most of the guys that I got late in drafts that ended up panning out were the more old, boring contention, like a Mike Conley at pick 120 or something like that.
Yeah.
And then he was 65. Jalen Johnson was probably the closest to it that we've had in like the last 2 or 3 years, honestly.
Yeah, a guy you're kind of like, I don't know if this he's good, but I don't know if he's like actually good. And then it's like, whoa.
Yeah, he's like,
there we go.
Legitimately good. All right, who's another? That was one of the risers, right? You want to do another riser?
I'll do another riser and a quick one quick riser as well.
Okay,
because I think it's an obvious riser. The quick riser is James Harden, right?
Yes.
This James Harden. I don't think we have to go too much far into that, but like, who's doing anything on that team other than James Harden? All right, cool. James Harden is going to revert back to the guy who's just hogging the ball, dribbling the clock out, doing the things that he does. It won't get up to that like top 3, top 5 vibes, but like he can still do stuff.
Yeah. I mean, how could he not? Paul George is gone. Kawhi Leonard just dropped out of the Olympics, so odds he makes it through a season healthy again seem less than stellar.
Yes.
Harden this last year was number 26 in 9-cat while taking 11.5 shots a game. That's a number that will have to go up.
It's going to go up.
Yeah. Like, I think the only question for Harden is maybe he goes in the 2nd round. Is he a 2nd rounder? Did we just find one again?
Maybe. I would take him in the 2nd round. I'd be like, yeah, this is fine.
I think I would too, actually.
Yeah.
And he's a safe floor 2nd rounder. You know you're going to get like 20 and 9 out of him this coming year, or I don't know, 19 and 9. That's not a guy who's falling back of 24 in overall ranking. There's almost no way other than health. That's the only way that and so I'll knock on whatever.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I mean, look, I mean, you can call that a quick one if you want, but I do think there's a discussion around Harden to say where should he get drafted, and I think the answer is probably 2nd round.
And I like some of these. Well, we both are very old man squad type people.
Yeah.
But like, I don't even know, he's not that old, but like the thing about guys like James Harden is that people get tired of hearing about guys who've been in the league this long.
Mm-hmm.
And if they ever like kind of like screw you over where it's like, I drafted James Harden 3rd overall and then he had bad season. And it's like, well, if he was like top 25, that's not really that bad of a season, but you obviously paid more for him. People sour on these guys like that. And like, this is like a really nice, hey, are you going to draft James Harden this year? And people are like, no, like, I'm not paying for that. And it turns out like, okay, his role changed. He's going to shoot more. He's going to score more. He's going to get more assists. I forgot he was this good when he's not playing 3rd fiddle, he's 2nd fiddle. Like, I forgot he was this good. And that he's not a top 30 guy. He's a top 15 guy. Okay, cool. Great.
Yeah. Basically, I mean, you're looking at like maybe Philly Harden, or possibly even slightly more than that.
Yeah,
like
somewhere around there.
Because the number one option, no one's ever going to have a higher usage rate with him than Joel Embiid did. So, like, whatever you think Kawhi Leonard does this year, it's not going to be as much as Embiid was doing. So probably, I would say like Philly plus is probably what you're looking at. And his Philly year, the good one, was 21 and 11.
That's great.
Yeah, that's
silly.
Pretty good.
Also, what was his numbers with Embiid out? How often is Kawhi going to be out?
Oh, I
Okay,
don't
cool.
have that handy, but it's gonna be big.
I mean,
It's gonna be a lot.
if you're listening to the Fantasy Basketball Podcast in the middle of summer, I think you know.
Yeah, it's gonna
I
be.
think you know that what that number
Yeah.
is.
All right, so that was the quick one, but I thought there was something worth
That is the quick
chipping
one.
away at a little bit. What's the other riser? And I may
All
have to
right.
change the thumbnail for today's show, by the way.
I think you should. I'm going to give you a stat line, and I'm also going to preface this that this was the third option on this team. I just want to tell me if this is a good player. 17 points, 6.5 rebounds, 3 assists,
I
1
know where you're
steal,
going.
almost a block. 87%, almost 88% from the line. 48, almost 49% from the field with
Mm-hmm.
almost 1.5 threes a game. That's a pretty good player. That's actually a top 50 player, certainly.
What if I told you that everybody hated this player?
Yeah. What if I told you
Yes.
everyone hates this player every single year, and he also finishes in the top 50 and has finished in the top like 25 in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
And everybody hates this guy.
I know exactly who you're talking about because he's on my all maligned team. He gets blamed even when he's not a top 2 option on his own team. He and D'Angelo Russell, by the way, are the 2
Yeah.
guys that I have in the all maligned
Everybody hates
team.
those guys.
Everybody hates those guys, and they like. I get with D'Lo, at least he talks a lot, so that might rub people the wrong way, and blah blah blah. This player, who we haven't named yet, but I think everybody's figured it out, doesn't. This dude never says a word, and he's like
No.
beloved in the community, but every time his
Just-
team loses, it's his fault. And when his
just keeps
team
showing
wins,
up,
the
just
other
keeps getting those stats very consistently. He never has like a crazy game. He never has a bad game, really. And then when he's asked to do more,
playoffs, I think his last playoff game was absolutely terrible.
Well, okay, Tobias Harris.
Tobias Harris
is on Detroit, and like I guess Cade Cunningham is the primary there, but like, is he 1A, 1B? Is Tobias? I don't want to call
even
Tobias
if he was
Harris
number
the second.
2. Call him number 2. I don't care.
Yeah, he's still going to do more in Detroit. He's 32. I thought he was older.
Yeah, because I've been putting him as the logo for the old man squad for the last 5 years in a row.
I've been drafting him and Mike Conley. I feel like I drafted all the time in the last decade, and I'm like, why doesn't anybody like these guys? And way back in the day, Jason Terry was always overlooked.
Oh yeah, I would like to say back in the day Al Horford, but he's still there.
Yeah, he's still doing it. Still top 100 guy.
15 years later, it's still Al Horford. No, dude, you're like, you didn't get me too fired up on today's show. You bring up Tobias Harris, now you've strummed the Dan Besbris walk-up song.
It's very easy.
It's out of control how hated this dude is. Like the Philly blogosphere just detests Tobias Harris.
Okay, well, I'm gonna say something. Yeah, I'm gonna say it. Philly fan base, stop. Just stop existing. Get out of here. You guys are dickheads. You guys are like some of the worst, absolute, just vile people. I'm saying it here right now. Come get some, Philly.
This is, by the way, we're talking to Mike Catron at Washington.
Scum of the earth, Philly.
Tobias Harris, I mean, you can go through his whole career, and it's been basically since like his third-ish year. I feel like it was when he went to Orlando. That was when things started to click a little bit. And we are literally now on a decade, a full freaking decade that everyone has just hated having Tobias Harris on their fantasy team, and he's done nothing to deserve that.
Well, actually, he's done nothing but overplay his draft value, which is literally the definition of sleeper. And on top of that, since we no longer have hot young sleepers, all we got left is old man sleepers.
That's
all we got. That's all you got left.
That's what old men like to do anyway, is sleep and rest.
I can't wait to sleep still. I cannot wait.
It all comes together so beautifully. And this is a career 48%er. He's a career 84%er at the foul line. But if you look at like the last 4 years, he's been in the mid to high 80s instead. And I'm trying to figure out the last time that he was a number 2 option on a team, and I feel like it was early Philadelphia years when Embiid
Maybe.
was like there but banged up a lot, and they didn't have Maxey yet, and they hadn't. Ben Simmons, I guess, was probably upright for maybe one of those.
I
I don't
forgot
know.
about Ben
Yeah,
Simmons already.
but he wasn't
Yeah,
taking shots, and Tobias Harris
no,
took 15, 16 shots a game
that's it.
those years, and he
So a
averaged
lot.
27 and 3, and he was, I think, like a top 39 cat guy. And every
Yeah,
year he's going to get drafted. Every year he's going to
I
get drafted 2.5 rounds back of where he finishes. And every year we play the same song, and it's like at some point he's going to show signs of slowing down, but there's been literally no sign of that so far. None.
no, none. I mean, like also like 32 is you're in your prime. Like that is a very healthy, very normal age to play basketball and not retire. I would not be shocked if this season he sets his own personal record for field goal attempts per game.
Oh man, I hope so.
Like, why not? What's
Because
going on in Detroit? Nothing.
what percentage of your teams do you think you're going to have Tobias Harris on? Because I'm gunning for
1,000.
100. Yeah.
I'm gonna go into other people's leagues and I'm gonna sign up for 1,000 leagues and only draft Tobias Harris and then leave. And then in the first round, I'm gonna leave the draft.
He is literally making
screw with the numbers.
That's beautiful. I want screenshots of all of this. Mike, give me one faller so I don't have to change the thumbnail because I don't want to do extra work.
Yeah, that's fair. Is Mikal Bridges a faller? It kind of feels like it.
Yeah, I think so.
It kind of feels like
it's
it.
That's a weird one though, because he falls a little bit into the same, not the same category as DeJounte Murray, but just like a guy that may be going to a situation that accentuates his skills better.
Yeah, I'm on the fence with Mikal Bridges. How about that? He's not the guy. Like we saw in Brooklyn that he is not the guy, and that he is better when he is kind of that puzzle piece within a team. The Knicks have a bunch of I feel like they have a bunch of great puzzle pieces. He's the best puzzle piece. He's the best third guy on a team you can have in the NBA probably. He's probably gonna have to try to be the second best player on this team, but he's not gonna have to be the guy. Jalen Brunson is the guy.
Yep.
And if you value, which you should, if you value percentages and turnovers, because those are 3 categories when you're playing in 9-cat. Actually, Mikal Bridges might overshoot his draft value if you're playing 9-cat. If you are punting percentages and all that stuff, yeah, he's a faller, but he might be a riser in a roto league.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit torn as well, and I keep having to go back to the same refrain, which is I don't have any idea where this dude is going to get drafted this year.
Yeah,
he got drafted at like 22 and disappointed the crap out of everyone.
He was kind of shit last year,
right? Don't you think the pendulum could swing too far the other way now, where it's like, 100%. Oh, yeah, I'm going to get him at 75. He's terrible, and it's like, oh well. I mean, when he was in Phoenix and he was just puzzle piece Bridges. Then he was like a top 40 guy. And then when he had to be the whole puzzle, he dropped to 90. It's pretty rare when guys make that big of a swing.
Huge drop. And anyone who drafted him in the second round because you're like, I don't know where this guy goes. But he's the guy, right? He's the guy. And to get that burnt, you never go back. You never go back to someone who burns you that bad. So you got a lot of people out there who aren't going to draft him no matter what round he's in. And I feel like, I don't know, as fantasy basketball gets more popular, there's like multiple pendulum swings, right? So it's like, all right, the pendulum swings, he's bad. All right, well, is he outside of the top 100 bad? I guarantee you some ADP or some early rankings is going to have him and Tobias Harris outside the top 100. Mm-hmm. And you're going to go,
that's the litter.
That's dumb. And so the pendulum swings back. And then then that hype starts coming. And it just depends on, you have to know who, that's why I usually play in leagues where I know the people instead of just playing in random leagues, is because I kind of know what my friends are going to feel about Mikal Bridges. And like the average, I think that first off, the average NBA person probably doesn't think about Mikal Bridges hardly at all. And
but us,
the above average NBA watcher probably does think about Mikal Bridges and is going to say he was bad last year. I think you got 3 more pendulum swings before you go, is that guy a 4th round player?
So let me ask you this follow-up question on that.
Yeah,
Because
is he top 50? I think
you're kind of making the argument for drafting super early, I think is what I'm hearing there, but I don't know if it's on purpose or not. It's like maybe
I don't want to draft this guy super early. I want him at a
no, sorry. Let me rephrase that. Like on the calendar, like when leagues open early draft before the pendulum catches up with, maybe right at the beginning it's like, nobody wants Mikal Bridges, he's going at 90, and you're like, well, I can take him at 82 instead and make sure I get him. But if we wait until October 10th to do our draft, the pendulum might have swung back. I typically don't like doing early drafts because I'd prefer to avoid weird injury stuff as opposed to maybe catching a Mikal Bridges value. But where do you stand on when to do your fantasy draft? I don't know if you and I have ever talked about that.
No, I don't. I have a cop-out answer. When everyone's available to meet in person, that's when you should do your fantasy basketball draft. That's when you should do it, even if it's like a week after the league starts. I'm okay with that. Like, who cares? But I'm on closest to starting date because I'd rather the value I get out of Mikal Bridges, getting him in like the 6th round, is not as detrimental as drafting someone in the 2nd round who's injured before the season starts.
Yeah, well said.
So I to close to the season.
Mike Catron, what you got going on these days, by the way? Hit me with the promo besides, living with a child.
Raising a child.
That's the big
one. Not working hard at my job, my actual job that I don't care about. Erase this part. Edit this out.
We're definitely
listen, my boss knows my vibe. He ain't gonna get mad about that statement. Being very, very mad that the Bulls did not get a 1st round pick for neither Alex Caruso or DeMar DeRozan.
I asked Mike Barner this yesterday, and I'll ask you the same thing. I forgot to. He was, I think, pretty stoic about it. That because you're finally getting rid of the pieces to start the rebuild.
Sure.
But it does, like you just said it feels like the knife cuts deep when you're like, we could have had like tons of assets for DeRozan and Caruso.
I think you could get 2 1st-round draft picks for Alex Caruso. That's how good Alex Caruso is. He is one of the best perimeter defenders in the entire league, and absolutely, I really don't think I've ever seen a player change games and personally win games on defensive plays. And I've seen him do it like 7 times in the last like 2 years, which is crazy. He literally is a game changer.
Idiotic things that I'm wearing a Lakers Ninja Turtles shirt today. One of the most idiotic things the Lakers have done in like the last 30 years.
Yes, and probably one of the smartest things the Bulls have done in the last 30 years. And then they completely ruined that by being like, how about Josh Giddey or whatever? It's like
it's kind of how it feels.
Like what?
What?
Josh Giddey and one of the 24 draft picks that they have in the next 5 years, like one of them, like 3 of them. No, 2 of them, 1, 0. Okay.
0.
Yeah. 0. They make OK City pay a premium. They have the assets. If they want them that bad, which they should.
No. The Bulls finally, your Bulls finally wised up. They finally were like, yeah, we need to pull the plug on this thing. It's not working. But
just a year and a half too late.
Well, the Hawks did it too. Like traded John Collins for a 2nd rounder, and it's probably going to happen with Capella.
Shit.
These teams, just do it, man. Rip the Band-Aid off. Why? How many?
The Bulls make too much revenue from their ticket sales. Stop going to games, please.
Yeah.
I've stopped paying for tickets, and if someone asks, if someone I know happens to get a ticket, I'm not going to say no, but I'm not going to pay. I'm not going to buy a ticket until Jerry Reinsdorf sells a team. Probably. So forever, for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I don't know that that's coming around anytime soon. So are you at all pleased that they're finally starting to pull the plug on, or is just like,
No, I'm not, because it's a year and a half too late. And their idea of a rebuild, if their idea of a rebuild is to get, I don't know, young 20 somethings who they think maybe could have a nice kickstart in a new situation, that's usually what people do to the Bulls. Like they get Wendell Carter Jr., they get take Lowry Markkinen off your hands, and all of a sudden, Lowry Markkinen's an all-star, right? I don't think the Bulls are going to be pulling a reverse Bulls here with any of these fucking players, right? So if they're not piling on draft picks for the next 2 drafts, which have like game-changing talents in them, then no, I'm not excited about this rebuild, because it'll be a 10-year rebuild into a team that makes the play-in, and then they'll do it again. That's like, unless they get lucky with a Derrick Rose or a Michael Jordan, they're not good. They don't wheel and deal in a way that allows them to rebuild like Utah is doing or OK City is doing. They don't have the people on their staff to figure that shit out. So no, I'm not excited at all.
Do you think, if you had to make a bet today, do you think Vooch and or Levine are on the team on opening night?
One of them will be, and it's probably Levine,
because his contract is so damn hard to move.
You just can't. It's not movable. People want a first round pick with it,
right?
And on the flip side, right, we already just saw DeMar DeRozan move, right? We didn't take on any money. We didn't take on Harrison Barnes at a first round pick, so we could have had a first round pick. And was it Harrison Barnes?
Yeah,
it was Harrison Barnes.
Yeah.
Is Harrison Barnes' contract shit? Of course it is. It's not as bad as Zach LaVine's, and it's only 2 years, and we're not going to compete in 2 years.
Oh man, I wish I would have gotten into Bulls earlier in the show. I'm incredibly entertained right now. But I've already taken more of your time than I promised I would. Mike Catron at Watch the Boxes, host of Watch the Boxes podcast. Mike, thank you so much. Can we do this again in a few weeks?
Absolutely, Dan. 100%.
I want to know how much sleep you're getting a few weeks from now. It feels like you're on a really nice upward trajectory.
I'm doing well. All blessings to the young baby. May she rest every night for 10 plus hours.
That is incredible, because anyway, I don't want to jinx it, so we're not talking about it right now. Mike, thank you so much, my man. I'll see you soon.
See ya.
He is the delightful Mike Catron. I'm so glad I got him fired up about Bulls at the end of the show. I almost forgot, and then he brought it up. It's his own damn fault. He is, again, at Watch the Boxes on Twitter. Mike Catron, host of Watching the Boxes Fantasy Basketball podcast. And if you look at his Twitter profile, he is a still disgruntled Chicago Bulls fan. And frankly, I actually thought that was going to be the response we got from Mike Barner yesterday, because, I mean, for me at least, if I was watching a team that I rooted for so heavily, which for me is the Lakers, just hang on to things so long when the whole world is pointing and going, you're the 9 seed. Just go get a thing. Like, everybody in the universe wanted Alex Caruso at the trade deadline last year. I would have been pissed too. And then yesterday, Mike was kind of like, you know what? I'm just glad they're finally tearing it down a little bit. But our two mics, Bulls fans, Catron, you can see still feeling that fire in his tummy. We had a couple of questions pop in that I will hit. One was over on Twitter, and that question was, as Dan does a poor job of finding it on the fly, there it is. Any thoughts on Kawhi dropping out of the Olympics? Sad as it may be, but it's looking like the old man bet expired in one season. So, this one again, and it's a little bit of a cop-out answer. This one comes down to his draft position, because with Kawhi, you're never going to have to pay full price, because no one ever expects him to make it through a season. So do you think you can get 60 out of 82 games out of Kawhi this coming year? If the answer is yes, and he continues to go towards the back end of that second round, then you probably can go down that path again. This year, Kawhi played in 68 out of 82 games. There's almost no way he gets to that number again. He was number 6 by totals this year, with Paul George alongside him. So you're talking about a Kawhi Leonard that took 17 shots a game. Without Paul George, that number, I mean, you can go back a couple of years, probably goes back up to 18 or 19. I know that Harden is there now, but he's more distributor than another normal alpha might be. And that year, when Paul George was out for most of the season, Kawhi was top 4. And I don't know if he gets that high. Now you've got Embiid, Shea, Jokic, and Luka and AD are all kind of fighting in that same spot. But I see no reason that Kawhi couldn't push himself up to top 5 per game. And when you're top 5 per game, just to kind of wrap up this thought, you don't need to play in that many ball games to be a second rounder by totals. So he plays in 60 games at that clip, he probably gets to his mark. I understand that's a hard path to go down on the head-to-head side because you're game planning for a bunch of zeros. Games capped formats, I don't think that we can write off Kawhi yet. A couple of questions that came in over on the YouTube side as well. Hey, Dan. What's up, Niels? Who, by the way, told me that he found our new site because of some of the shorts that I was doing. So I'll still churn those out, I guess, when news breaks. That'll be more news breaky. Dan, will Chet be impacted by Isaiah Hartenstein this year? How do you think their rotation is going to look? And where do you see Chet at this point? Will he be top 15 or top 20? That's a great question. So my thought is they didn't bring in Hartenstein to play him like 22 minutes a game. So he's not just going to be the Chet Holmgren backup at center, which would have been about 18 and a half, 19 minutes a game this past season. Meaning there are going to be some twin tower minutes. So if you're just going to do sort of like the fuzzy math iteration of the Chet Hartenstein situation, I would say start by saying Hartenstein plays all 18 backup center minutes. Okay? 18 is the floor. How many twin tower minutes do those guys occupy on a given night? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12? I don't think it's a dozen. 6 in each half is a lot of minutes of sort of big lumbering lineups. Not that Chet, like, you'll have good rim protection. You'll have very good rebounding. Your floor spacing will be okay because Chet can step out and hit the 3. Hartenstein cannot. Shea doesn't really hit the 3 ball, so you kind of have to be careful with how much non-shooter center minutes you've got. So my take is you're probably looking at about 8 twin tower minutes per ball game as an average number, and that gets Hartenstein to about 25, 26 minutes a ball game. Okay, what does that do to Chet? Not a whole lot. He averaged 8 rebounds a ball game. Maybe you see that number come down a little bit because of his time on the floor. Some number of those minutes are going to be occupied alongside Hartenstein. We saw it with Karl Anthony Towns. As these guys move away from the bucket, big men numbers suffer. The question wasn't even about what Hartenstein's going to do. We did a show on that, but he can be top 75 in 25 minutes a ball game. So I still think he's going to put up some decent numbers this year. For Chet, I'm quite concerned, actually. Even if you see the usage take a step forward, 11 and a half shots a game this last year, maybe that goes to 12, 12 and a half, something like that. I think you may see a sort of pendulum swing on the other stuff. Do the rebounds get hurt? Do the blocks get hurt in any way as he's forced into some power forward minutes? Because you simply can't play Hartenstein at the 4. So my thought is Chet Holmgren probably doesn't take a massive leap forward. He's probably a guy that's going to get drafted in the second round, where it's more like a third round. Early, maybe say early third, early to mid third kind of target for per game numbers. And then if he's healthy again, then obviously he beats it. So maybe he becomes kind of a boring, relatively safe late second round type of play. I just don't think you see the per game stuff jump forward. And then Asada Taco says, since you guys are high on Tobias, what is the earliest round or pick range you're comfortable taking him? That's also a really good question because so far we've talked about Tobias as someone that we expect to fall in drafts because he's Tobias Harris, but we don't know that that's necessarily going to be the case because he's now going to a place where people can be like, oh, he's going to get to do more playing alongside a point guard, but no other really big time usage guys after playing in Philly alongside Joel Embiid, who's like the titan of usage rate, Tyrese Maxey, who's a high usage, semi-distributing shooting guard, really, And then for a little while, James Harden, who does pass, but again, when you put another guy in front of Tobias, that pushed him down the pecking order. This is the first time he's been the number 2 guy. I think people are going to realize that. I think you're finally seeing it with analysts too, where even those that typically don't like the boring old guys are still pointing at him and going, this dude's probably going to be okay this year. I think the floor for Tobias Harris this season is 50. He was number 48 last year as the third fiddle, taking 13 and a half shots a ball game. Yes, some of that was when Embiid was out, although interestingly pointed out, his field goal attempts only changed by about a half, 0.7, 0.8, something like that, when Embiid was not on the court. So he didn't really change his role that much, even when all that usage got dumped back in. And maybe that's an argument for the fact that, like, in this new place, maybe he, again, doesn't change his role that much. I would argue that he probably does a little bit more because he's being brought in as the quote-unquote, like, veteran leadership, which wasn't really his job in Philadelphia. So I'd expect 14-plus shots per game for Tobias, and if you just extrapolate everything that he's done into this new one, 50 range is basically your floor. So my hope is that he falls to 60 or deeper in fantasy drafts. I think if you take him earlier than that, you've given yourself a chance where he might not hit really at all. Probably not a loss. You draft him at like 55. I don't think you're going to lose on that pick, but you're not going to gain all that much. Now, the upside for Harris is, what if he's like, yes, I need to go take some shots because this team offensively is super bad, and he takes 15 and a half shots per game. Yeah, now you're talking about a guy that crawls into the third round. Now he's an early third rounder, even, mid third rounder, like around 30, frankly. And that's where you've created a little bit of that window. So I would say no earlier than 50 on Tobias if you want to preserve some value. And then every 6 to 12 slots, he falls beyond that. And we'll get the number when we see pre-ranks come out. That's when you can start to really pile up some value. Would you rather pick, this is Nils again, Tyrese Halliburton over Joel Embiid? I'm concerned about Hallie's second half, and could that be influenced by Pascal Siakam? Yes, it was influenced by Siakam. It was also influenced by sort of a semi-tight hamstring. Honestly, I don't have a great answer to that question because Halliburton was number 10 on a per game basis. Embiid was basically like double his value out of that one slot. But if you're in a head-to-head league, I don't know how you draft Joel Embiid pretty much anywhere. Like, you might get stuck with a first-round pick who plays 45 games, and it's almost impossible for you to win in your playoffs if he's not there for those, and it's damn hard to even get to your playoffs if he misses 2 months in the middle of the season. Halliburton is a much safer play. Games cap formats, I might lead Embiid. Like, if you're sitting at, I don't know, where do we think Halliburton goes this year? 7, 8, 9, something in that range, and Embiid is still out there, I'd have a hard time in a games cap format passing up the guy who could be the number 1 per game player in fantasy. He probably does a little bit less with Paul George there, but Shea probably also does a tiny bit less. So you may have like a 3-headed monster at the top, Embiid, Shea, and Jokic, and these guys are just massive needle movers. And if one of them's available for you at pick 10, I know that Halliburton's going to get you 20 and 10, but man, Embiid is like, this is a league-winning fantasy player if he gets to 60 ball games. That just obliterates. It's so hard to obliterate your ADP if your ADP is 10, and Embiid has a chance to do it. So games cap formats, I probably go Embiid around that spot. Head-to-head, no games cap, whatever, you probably have to go the safe route. We went a little longer than expected today, but you know what? It was fun. It was fun. Big thank you again to Mike Catron, host of the Watching the Boxes podcast. He is at Watch the Boxes over on social media. Folks, again, I ask you, please, if you're catching this show live or after the fact or whatever it is, take a moment to hit that thumbs up button. Hit the little thumb and subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on iTunes, subscribe on Spotify, and please take a second to drop that 5-star review. Those really do help as well as people continue to realize Dano's not dead. I'm still here. I'm just on a new feed. Thank you to the questions. That was great. That was a lot of fun. Have an amazing rest of your Wednesday, everybody. We're back with you tomorrow. Who's the Thursday morning? I screwed this up. Who are we talking to Thursday morning? Oh, it was supposed to be Matt Smith. My kid has a late Little League game today, so hopefully it would be Matt Smith on tomorrow's show. If it's not, it's my fault, and we'll talk to him early next week. If Matt's not around, then you'll get a solo show. You'll suck it up, people. Either way, it's going to be fun. We'll see you then.